Now, we've been doing and developing this technology in a way as a retrofit energy system. In other words, what good is it to put it into home heating if you have no fuel source to be able to run the trucks and operate the automobiles? What good is it if you don't have an energy source that you cannot put into industry and maintain the industrial base? What good is it, for example, if you cannot be able to maintain aviation? You know, during the Arab embargo, we also was confronted with another problem. The problem being is that at that particular time, the United States government had only 2.5 days of aviation fuel for global defense. Today it's down to a day and a quarter. When it reaches a day supply, the Joint Chiefs of Staff will have to make the decision, no more global defense. Any of you ever hear anything about the war brokers? If you want to study about history of World War I, World War II, you'll start to realize there were men spatially trained and women trained in order to bring countries into war, to break their economic back, to take over the controls of their countries. You ever hear of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission? You ever hear about the Council, the Group of 300? You hear about the internationalists that are controlling to bring in a one world government. Now we're heading for a one world government, but unfortunately, if the one world government is headed under a control, is controlled by a Mussolini or Hitler or a person filled with the demonic spirit, we're in one heck of a problem. If that democratic society of the world government would be a representative of each country in the world, then in fact we could be able to stabilize as people upon the earth. The attitude that the multi-internationalists is to come up with zero growth, industrial growth, zero population growth. When I was making a presentation in Geneva to 52 nations there, I was blocked in presenting this technology, not because of the viability of the technology, because the international attitude is they do not want industrial growth to be maintained. There's a move to try to force the countries to accept that they would sign over their natural resource rights. That if you sign over your natural resource rights, you have taken over the countries without even firing a shot. This is to help bring in a one world government. The number one thing that will diffuse the entire episode and be able to maintain us is to bring an alternate energy source in that we can be able to sustain and maintain not only the industrial base of this country but of the world. And therefore I will share this information with you. And once I share it with you, then you have a responsibility. I'm sharing a responsibility to you so great. Now the power structures to be, we all hear about the guys that invent the carburetors that go 200 miles per hour and what have you, and they never get out of the market area. We talk about high energy systems, development of high technology, and they never seem to get out in the marketplace. Why is that? You know, and Rockefeller was a very smart man to get our economies to operate on fossil fuel. He got a hold of a think tank. And in the think tank, he says, I want you to come up with motivating thoughts that would demotivate the people in order to bring us up on the fossil fuels. You see, at that time, we're talking about high energy research and development, are we not? And yet Rockefeller wanted to convince the population of the world that we need fossil fuel to maintain the economies, and therefore suppress and prevent alternate energy sources to come forward. And so in this think tank, he came up with such phraseologies. Well, you can always lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink. Any of you have ever said that? You know, if you say that out of your mouth, you know that you believe it. It's the greatest lie in the world. If you lead a horse to water and he doesn't want to drink, I'll assure you that if you stake him about 4 feet away from the water in 2 days flat, he'll try to break the rope to get to the water. If you want to speed up the process, feed him some salt. Another great demotivating thought. Well, you can't buck City Hall. How about another demotivating thought? 2 things you never discuss is politics and religion. Do you know why in the news media that you are bombarded with tremendous negativism? Because they had found out the physical, psychological makeup of the individual is such that if you receive so much negativism, you turn it off. Do you know that if our forefathers and our grandfathers would awaken out of their graves and see what's taking place in our country today, do you know what happened? They would grab their arms and go to Washington, D.C. and clean out our government. Absolutely. The negativism that's presented to you is the process of desensitizing you to allow such atrocities to take over. And if you don't think that there are people in the world that do not want America to stand. You know why? Because the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, says as free people we have ability to enjoy certain inalienable rights that was given to us by God. And unfortunately there are some people who does not want us to continue to enjoy the freedom that our forefathers fought. And when I turned and said, I will do this, Lord, it had to be by faith. Because I was given a great gift. That gift was to be raised under freedom. Now let's see how we can use water as fuel. Because the greatest thing that all political leaders fear, that you and I would come together in one accord. That if you and I would come together in one accord, no political system in the world, no multi-internationalist groups could defeat you. Look what happened to Russia after 70 years. They said, so we no longer want communism. We're tired of the KGB killing our people and torturing our people. And said, enough is enough. And that's why you receive the negativism. That's why in these conferences that they will try to promote and try to tell you that you have not the power to say so in our government. And I want to tell you that under the Constitution of the United States, read it. For it gives us the ultimate power to be able to determine the destiny and the strength of our country. And how I'm bringing this technology in, it can't come through the multi-international structures. If I would sign over this technology to General Electric or Westinghouse, they would be taken over within 24 hours. If you think you got political pressures in the United States government, try to negotiate with the military. For their political pressures is great. And they cry out. And you know, when the Arabs came to me and offered me $1 billion cold cash simply to stop on the technology, and when I said no, I will not do this. And he said, you will be stopped. And I said, why is that? He said, because the apathy of the American people is such that they will not come behind you. And for a long time, that statement stood out. But I will assure you, today, not only in the United States, but in the world, that they're coming together in one accord and say it's enough. Because if we do not reverse this, I've recently come back from Sweden. Their entire forest are dying. Why? Because the pollutants that's going in the air, covalently linking up with the ionosphere, is decreasing the light intensity coming into this atmosphere. And as a result of this decrease in light intensity, bacteria is now allowed to grow, which is now causing blight, which is now starting to kill our trees. Go over and look in the Black Forest, that even the trees and the roots are dying. We are on a planet, which is our spaceship, and if we do not reverse, if we do not come together in one accord, then I would say, gentlemen, that we will not survive. Now, when we show this technology, you must now make the decision whether or not you come together in one accord and try, and we can do it, to come together to keep this country strong, as well as to protect it. And when President Reagan was advised of this technology, he turned against the multi-internationalists and said, do not block or do not allow this technology to go forward. And he wrote the executive action to ensure that this technology would not only be protected for the United States, but also to be protected for the world. And it's amazing to me that we have the abilities that we can proceed on. Go ahead. The first thing, and always been the first objective, and always will be the first objective in developing the technology, you must legalize it first, and then bring it in. Many inventors blow their ego, they get to their Achilles heel to try to obtain the information, not for the benefit of you and I, but it's the benefit of control or manipulation or suppression of that technology. So when you develop your high technology, you do everything possible. The prime objective is to legalize the technology. When you receive that gold seal and that little red ribbon, it says that you have complied with the laws of the land. Is it not so? It's not what Stan Meyer says. It's what is now been legalized. And if there's any question of operability of the technology, under the law, what do they have? They'll pull you under U.S. Code 35 U.S. Code 101 and show operability. And when we showed operability of this technology, then it became a great concern to protect this technology for all the countries as well as the United States. So as I move, there are many people who have seek to try to cause me to stumble, have tried to seek to suppress me, has tried to seek in many ways, but the Lord has always allowed that we can proceed on with the technology. As we're legalizing the technology, I'm subject to the national security laws of this country. I'm also subject to the national security laws of other countries under the PCT Treaty Act. Other countries who now are informed of this type of technology is requesting that this technology would also be protected for their countries. For you see, if this type of technology is restricted from those other countries, then their entire economic base could collapse. You know, if you can use water as a fuel source to maintain the industrial base of one country, but if it's blocked in another, you can drop the prices on your goods and commodities, and therefore the other country cannot be able to sustain itself. Unfortunately, there are those who seek the power controlled by greed, right? And seems to have the desire to control man under greed. It's a form of this sickness. And unfortunately, in my many battles, we've had to overcome this type in order to bring this technology out. So you'll have to forgive me for those who feel that I should have brought the technology out further. I had to be in compliance with both the U.S. and the national security laws and the PCT Treaty Act in order to get around the loopholes that are set there not for you and I, but set there to control and manipulate the high technology. And so, if you never violate that prime directive, you can bring it in. Go ahead. Water is fuel. You know, how many of you here today have driven a car here? Any of you driven cars at all? Do you realize that when you're driving on gasoline, do you know that you're running on a hydrogen? You know that if you look at the chemical equation of gasoline, you will find out the hydrogen atom is attached to the carbon atom. Is not so? And basically, in the highest octane of gasoline, you have roughly about a half a pound of hydrogen to it. Now, water, on the other hand, is 2 to 1. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Is it not so? How many pounds of hydrogen do we have in water? You find out by the atomic weight is around 1.7 pounds of hydrogen in water. I had the most scientific compilation study on hydrogen that's ever come out of the scientific world from NASA. Did we not propel the Columbia spaceship by hydrogen and oxygen? And in that report, it clearly stipulated that hydrogen was the most ideal fuel of the future. It can be utilized anywhere, solve even the environmental pollution problem, but they did not have an answer in 3 areas. 1, to produce the hydrogen gas or release it economically from water, control the rate of production, be able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen gas to co-equal to fossil fuels, and add the 4th one, be able to transport it without spark ignition. And I wrote all the patent rights both nationally and internationally on this type of technology, to be able to use water as a fuel source.